Welcome, everyone. My name is Ashish Kaushal. I'm CEO of the diversity staffing firm HireTalent and founder of Consciously Unbiased, the movement to build belonging in the workplace. Consciously Unbiased is about amplifying voices of impact makers and tapping into the power of community to create change. Today, we're closing out Black Philanthropy Month, and today's conversation will cover what it means to be a Black philanthropist, action steps people can take, and the impact of funding Black causes on the Black community and also on society at large. Now, our special guests are Crystal Perry. She is a Consciously Unbiased facilitator and president of Melanated Pearl. Welcome. Dr. Crystal Menzies, founder and chief innovation officer at EmancipatED. Bomani Johnson, executive director at Nafasi Fund. And Erinn Corbett-Wright, senior manager at workforce development at Salesforce and founder of Ethos Advisory Services. Welcome, everybody.
Good.
So I'd love to start off with, I can't give you justice on what you guys do. And so I'd say, if you could tell us who you are, what you do, and which Black philanthropy cause you're personally passionate about. Krista, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I like to say, hey, world, it's your girl, Melanated Pearl, bringing that Black light to things that aren't quite right. My name is Crystal Perry. I'm the founder and president of Melanated Pearl. Our mission is to educate, uplift, and empower. We are a 501c3 foundation located in Clayton County, and we provide services that focuses on the needs of Black women in our community. So again, anything that pours into the educational upliftment and the empowerment of Black women in our community in the Metro Atlanta is philanthropies that we pour into, including specific nonprofits. And I'll just give one shout out to Hearts of Nourish Hope.
Welcome. Very cool. So you proved my point about the intro. I can't do justice to how you guys can describe it. Dr. Crystal Menzies.
I don't quite have the flow that the other Crystal has. So no freestyles. But my name is Dr. Crystal Menzies. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of EmancipatED, an organization that supports people and individuals and groups in translating education and liberation theory into practice by creating customized guides. And I'm also a researcher at the Learning Research and Development Center. So the cause that's deep in my heart and everything I research and the work I do is tied to educational inequities, and in particular, identity development for Black students.
Amazing. Welcome. We're excited to have you. Erinn, you're next.
Sure thing. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erinn Corbett-Wright, and I am a philanthropist and resource connector. Professionally by day, I'm the senior manager of workforce development philanthropy at Salesforce, specifically supporting the giving that the Salesforce Foundation does throughout the U.S. I also empower, support, and explore paths to authentic leadership with nonprofit professionals by way of my coaching consultancy, Ethos Advisory. And I'm most passionate about philanthropy that removes barriers to access and helps to end the root causes of intergenerational poverty as a survivor of poverty myself.
Love it. Welcome. I'm excited to have you here, and love all the things Salesforce does to give back to society and the community. Bomani Johnson, you're next.
Hey, everybody. Bomani Johnson here with Nafasi Fund. I'm the executive director. Nafasi Fund is a fiscal sponsor that actually supports Black-led organizations. Our mission is to make sure that we connect these work and these causes to opportunities, capacities, and space. You know, the opportunity to be supported and do the work that they need, the opportunity to also have access to their full capacities to do the work that they want to do in Black communities, and the space. Sometimes Black folks just need space to be. And that's exactly what we want to provide. We say that we want to be a fiscal home for our partners, and in doing so, be able to provide them with the best types of services that any fiscal sponsor can provide, while also giving them the ability to be completely who they are and do the work the ways that they need to in their communities to bring about change. As far as the cause for Black philanthropy that I think I'm most supportive of or most into is anything that philanthropy does that really connects to liberation for Black folks. I am a staunch supporter of us being free, because I also understand that our ability to access the completeness of who we are is impactful for the entire world.
Welcome. Thank you. So I'm going to throw you a question and then everyone else can add into it. So what does Black philanthropy mean to you? Because I know it has different meanings for different people.
Is that for me first, or we're just going?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say that Black philanthropy, I mean, just when we think about what philanthropy is, there's so many different definitions. The one I think that really resonates the most with the way that we do it as Black folks is how you give of your time, talent, and treasure. There's also another definition that talks about the love of humanity. And I think that that's what we express when we are doing like philanthropic things as Black folks. While we don't have access to as much, financial wealth as others, we have who we are. We have what we have access to in terms of the things that we use to be able to live, to be able to grow, and that's what we often share. My earliest understandings of Black philanthropy were, as a kid when we opened our home to people. There was a good friend of my sister's who was having trouble with her mom, and we opened our home to her so that she could stay with us for a while. And I'm just thinking about my aunt taking care of folks who came to the U.S. for either pursuing work or educational opportunities, and opening our home to them and being able to give. So you open your home, you're not just giving somebody a space to stay, you're really giving of yourself. So they were basically parts of our family for a long time. And that's what I understand Black philanthropy to be, is that we give of what we have, or we share what we have, not because we are looking for some reward someplace else, but because it's what's necessary for our communities to be whole and to thrive.
I love that, Bomani. If I could just add, it is a shared responsibility, like a collective responsibility, not only to give of time, but to be involved. I give a shout out, and I'm going to do this throughout, to Simplistic Restored Living, who is a nonprofit in our community, who we were able to partner with them to split the cost to cover the storage of a mother who was being displaced. And so we can remove that competition and actually share the responsibility for caring for those who are most vulnerable. Because again, we're both nonprofits serving the same community. And rather than us compete for funds, how about we come together to share the responsibility of caring for those who are in need. And again, I think that's just another example of Black philanthropy that I'm into, and that I see those seeds kind of budding in my community every day.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Crystal, and even Bomani, because I am of the perspective that Black philanthropy is ancestral, right? It is the perspective that any and everything is philanthropy. So when we prioritize community with staples like fish fries and rent parties, it's your mom watching your children so that you can work. It's the collection plate that's getting passed in extra time so that we can raise money for our babies when they go to college. It's the plate of food that your auntie always puts to the side for the neighbor that might be too proud to admit that they're hungry. So much of Black life outside of what comes out of our pockets is philanthropy in the essence of the love of brothers, which is the true blue kind of Greek translation of that word, right? And as we think about what social constructs may be prohibiting, the kind of equitable recognition of Black folks as philanthropy, it is because we have kind of confined ourselves to only thinking about it as time and money when it is so much more.
Absolutely. Crystal?
So this reminds me of so many things, but my family also was like an epicenter of come here when you need a place to stay, and a place of informal adoption, and to support people who are trying to get back on their feet. So when my uncle was released from prison, he came and lived with us so he could have a home address that he could use to apply for jobs. When my cousin they threatened to put her in the foster care system, she stayed with our family. So I consider that to fall under the umbrella of Black philanthropy. And The research framework I use is called community cultural wealth, but all it does is identifies what minoritized communities have done and are doing to leverage their strengths independent of financial situations or anything. So familial capital and those extended kinship networks are social capital. Let me connect you to so-and-so. My baby need a job real quick, who can do this thing. That's how I define Black philanthropy. And like Erinn said, snaps. It is ancestral. It's what we've been doing within and outside of external systems that exist.
It's interesting, guys. A lot of the common themes I've been hearing here, and one is that it's not all just about financial, right? It's about love, emotion, giving, understanding. And then the big one is it's not about me, it's about we, and not expecting an ROI or something back, feedback mechanism, where if I give something, I can expect something back and paying it forward, There's a documented racial wealth gap, and that may lead people to think that financially well off is the only way they can help with philanthropy. How might this not be the case? I kind of think you guys went through a lot of those things, but go for it.
I love to say your skills and talents will make a way for you. And I have a perfect example that just happened this philanthropy month. We had our first fall fundraiser, which was a fashion show. And anyone who knows me, I'm stylish, but I'm not fashionable. I'm not into labels. But I had an opportunity to connect with 3 Black female designers who were budding and actually then trusted me to take their artistry, their wearable art, and select community models. And so these people gave their time in kind, and each of them had a story to tell. And we adorned them in this wearable art by these Black designers. We were able to host the event in a Black female space. So it was in kind, as we are a nonprofit. We had performers, John Good, who again is right now on the MARTA bus in Atlanta, known and noted for sharing the stories of people who are melanated. And we came together in a powerful experience. It was called Alter Ego, to actually, of course, raise money for our organization. But it was really a $100,000 show put together by the talents and skills of those who wanted to make an impact in our initiatives, because we have a summer shower. So those who are actually connected, and they might not be able to go out with me to shower people, but they actually give their talents and skills to put that fundraiser on so that we can continue to gather the funds. The chef was a Black female. So again, it was on brand, and everyone in the community that is connected with us was able to pour in to the event to make it something special. And it was, a time that I proved it even to myself as we talk about these things. Like, it just happened in this month, and it was the power of us all coming together.
Love it.
It's funny that you mentioned kind of working within your networks or leveraging resources, right? Because I think that is something that we found kind of intrinsic to the Black lived experience in America. So how I think about Black philanthropy outside of going into your pocket is even a way that I've been a beneficiary of it, which is sponsorship. And sponsorship is when you leverage your standing, your position, your power and influence to reach a hand back and offer someone else with bright, a ton of potential, a new opportunity or a new level. And I think we most kind of commonly refer to this as the hookup. So like, we talk about philanthropy and kind of the core tenets because that's social capital, right? The hookup is social capital. Getting some sponsorship is expending social capital. So we do it all the time. It's all around us. We just have different terms for it. And I think if we go through the process of adding that cultural nuance and kind of complexity to the conversation, you'll find that, better than any Rockefeller, any Gates or Bezos or Mackenzie Scotts of the world, Black people live philanthropy through and through.
Absolutely. But Erinn, you also bring up a good point. So like, you don't have to be Black to help with Black philanthropy, right? So it's a social capital and networks and using your resources and sort of highlighting and putting a focus on this. I think that's also important.
So I was living in Houston when Hurricane Harvey hit us, speaking of allies supporting. And I was working at a nonprofit that helped students get to and through college. And so we're just trying to hunt down our kids, like, where are they? Are they and their family safe? So one of our students still desperately wanted to make it to campus. It was going to be her first year of college, but like roads were destroyed. So it was literally a collective of mostly Black folks, but then white allies within and outside of the organization based on where we were in the city, providing different things. So I was the one like posting on Facebook, collecting money. Someone else who lived in a part of the city where she could access a store bought gift cards. And then we coordinated with the young woman's family to drive her to a certain spot. She had to walk across a destroyed bridge to hand over the gift cards, and then someone else picked her up on the other side of the bridge to drop her off to campus. So that was Black philanthropy plus allies in action.
I love it.
Dr. Menzies, you just brought up a point that I was going to bring up too, is that one of the things that, you know, I think about, you know, just to try to add on is how we give to folks we don't even know, right? I'm thinking about, well, I went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and, you know, one of the things, when I was there, one of the things that we were doing was celebrating the 50th or 40th, I think it was the 40th anniversary of this thing called like the something 500, where there was this this effort to make sure that at least 500 Black students were accepted to the University of Illinois in like 1968 or something like that, or 64 or something like that, right? But you know, the campus also had a rule at the time that Black folks couldn't live in the dorms. So so it was people in and around Champaign, Black folks basically in and around Champaign and Urbana, Illinois, that allowed these students who they didn't know to stay in their homes because they needed to go back and forth to the campus to get to school, but couldn't, you know, of course, go back to Chicago or St. Louis or East St. Louis or the places that they were brought from or that they came from to go to school. So it's those types of examples, I think, that come up as well. Is like when we have what we have, we give. And that's what I think a big, you know, that's like a core tenet of who we are when we talk about Black philanthropy.
That's a great point. What are some other obstacles that it comes to in giving back to Black causes, and how can we remove those barriers?
Trust. Trust is the biggest barrier to giving to, empowering, and supporting Black causes, in my opinion. We will innovate, we will pilot, we will invest in early stage in white-led, often Black-serving organizations, probably 7 to 8 times out of 10. And I'm saying this from the position of privilege of being a funder and trying to galvanize some of my colleagues to make different decisions around their risk appetite when it comes to supporting Black-led organizations. But trust is the biggest hurdle. If you think about traditionally how giving happens to nonprofit organizations, particularly in the institutional context, oftentimes it's not just the strength of your proposal. It's whether or not you reached out to ask questions prior to the proposal deadline. It's whether or not you sent a follow-up email following your informational conversation with the funder. All things that have nothing to do with the quality of the program, but they build trust and help to create those relationships that yield those large dollar investments. So I would say, from my perspective, the largest barrier is trust, or the willingness to extend that trust to the leaders who are often doing the work most authentically.
I would second that. And again, going further in that, the people who are most vulnerable don't trust the resource, because storytelling is so much a part of you know, gathering dollars and getting donors and, you know, getting to people's heartstrings. But when you are dealing with people who are vulnerable, that means that you're asking them to share their weakest moments, some of the things they may be ashamed of, especially in dealing with mothers. One of the things that I feel like we do well is that we go in with no judgment, because everybody has to eat. And the idea that if you, and I can say that to anyone who's listening, everybody as a child had a time where we remember our mother being sad, right? You remember that? You can, and you would have done anything to help your mom. Guess what? Now in these positions, we can help those mothers, and we don't need to know everything about their story other than that they're in need. And so using my organization to vet, people, to build that trust to those donors, so we can say you're making an investment in, to actually lift someone up. But I love also that you brought up trust, because oftentimes people will say, we set this up and nobody came, and we had this to give, and, the population, they must not want help. And it's like, are you there for help? And are you listening to the people? And are you doing it in a way that humanizes them? And again, in their storytelling, can we make sure that we are being sympathetic, compassionate, and empathetic? And with that, I think that, we'll be able to match the dollars to the need.
Absolutely. I appreciate what both you said, Crystal and Erinn. And, this question of trust also, and then also like this exploitative way of us having to tell our stories, to keep reliving pain in order to get support to allegedly, lessen the pain, is something that really bugs me. For a long time, I was doing things in this space around racial equity and training, and working with funders and other folks around, getting them a basic understanding of what race is and what anti-racism is and those types of things. And one of the things that really kind of bugged me was almost like this prerequisite for there to be a level of knowledge or a level of understanding or a level of even agreement about the harms that have been caused, the harms that have been done for centuries to communities of color, before some change could happen in the way that philanthropies operate and act. I don't really care about what you know, in a sense. If you're hurting me or you're hurting somebody else, and that is something that you have to be keenly aware of, otherwise, why are you in this field? Then what are you doing? Then why can't you start to fund in a different way instantly, without there being a whole sea change of things that needs to happen within your institution, with your board and with the senior leadership? There's things that can be done. So yeah, it's a question of, I believe you, it's a question of trust. It is this thing that we've been trained to do, to share our pain in order to get some relief for our pain. But it's also, it's not, some of this ain't on us, right? It's about folks who sit in these seats, white folks, Black folks, other folks of color who sit in the seats at these institutions, recognizing the pain and the harm that these institutions have done, and understanding that, but not letting that stand in the way of what needs to be done in the communities that they say that they support. Listening to those communities, doing what they say, and investing in what is being said. I mean, that's a way to get past it too.
I think you said a word. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
He said a word, because a gap I've seen is white founded organizations who then place a Black or brown figurehead. And now the Black and brown figurehead is the one gaining the funds because they have access to the white wealthy networks. But the grassroots orgs, who are more impactful, who are started by people from the community, because they don't have access to those networks, aren't getting the funding. So when you said listening to the community, actually funding the people from the community who are doing the thing versus the people who parachuted into the community with a savior mentality and place figureheads at the top, is a big obstacle I see. Just because these organizations that I've experienced have been perpetuating a lot of the harm, but now they're doing it in blackface.
So 2 questions to that. One is, how do you, let's say I'm a white philanthropist and I want to get access to actually make a big impact. How do we do that? Like, is there sources or places that they can go to actually get to the grassroots level and fund it that way, rather than funding it through a different type of organization that's not really in tune or in touch with the communities?
It's funny that you raised that question, because it requires the same level of work that funders often push back into the laps of those running community-based organizations. And that is deep listening, That's stakeholder engagement. That's being willing to leave privilege aside long enough to humbly accept that community is the best determinant of the solutions that make sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, and because of that, it requires kind of a tailored approach to whichever community that you're trying to positively impact. We are not a monolith. These issues are not monolithic depending on where you live. Poverty in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic looks vastly different than poverty in the Deep South, which looks vastly different than poverty in, kind of flyover country. And so as a consequence, it's being willing to go where community says you need to, which kind of inherently means deep listening, stakeholder engagement, and then listening to what those outcomes actually are, rather than making it fit into a box that feels nice against your giving priorities.
So Erinn, on some level, you're almost saying that, like, let's say I made an assumption. I'm saying this community needs this type of help, and the reality is the community saying, no, I actually need this type of help, and so we have to stop pushing what we think is good for them rather than what's actually good, and listening to say, okay, what do you really need, and then provide that instead.
Exactly, because one of the great critiques of philanthropy is that it is state shaping work, that it is an extension of influencing and telling people how to live, saying what is a cause worth caring about, what is a cause worth receiving support for versus those that don't. And it also kind of creates a threshold for pain and suffering, quite frankly, right? If I say you need to be in X, Y, or Z position in order to receive help, or your organization has to kind of position itself in this way, I'm not actually empowering you. I want you to reach kind of a point of desperation before I provide the intervention, regardless of whether or not the intervention was meaningful when I initially pointed out my issue.
Yeah, and don't make me jump through hoops to get that help.
Exactly, because the burden of proof only helps you as the funder. It does nothing for the individual. The individual knows they're hurting.
Part of it's also about assumptions. So I'll tell you, I took a class in college called Inequality in America, and it was the migration patterns of poor people across the US, right? And there's this assumption that people don't want jobs, they don't want to do things, but there's basic things that you don't have, like a mailing address, right? Because I took this in the 90s. Right. And so, like, we didn't even think about that, but you can't apply for a job if you don't have a mailing address because they can't reach you. Right. So there's fundamental things that, like, we assume that people don't want something, and it's more we don't listen and understand. We have to get rid of those assumptions and say, okay, what's really what's happening?
Absolutely.
I love that you bring that up, because one of the programs that we have, the Mother of Pearl, we serve a lot of people who are living in extended stays, which again, that you have covering, but you are unhoused or, for lack of a better word, homeless. Our school system has figured out a way to send buses to those hotels to gather those children so that they're educated. But our elected leaders haven't figured out a way to make those homes, those rooms that people have been staying in 2 to 3 years count as permanent residency. So when you're talking about leveraging even federal dollars where elected leaders are connected, the people who actually would benefit the most don't have a dog in the race, so to speak, because you also cannot vote if you do not have a permanent address, again, in Atlanta, Georgia, where we are getting ready for, the fight of our life here. But those things are all things that come into play. And so when we're talking about philanthropy, and going back to what Erinn said about leveraging your power if you're in those seats, so that you can lessen some of the barriers so that grassroots organizations can get some of these funding. If you had, a $500,000 budget, would you be fundraising at this level again? But you have to have been operating less than 2 years. Sometimes I look at these grant requirements and I'm like, did their cousin start a company and they just want to, because it's like so specific that it is not even it couldn't have sprouted out of a community need, which is supposed to be the foundation of, service, hopefully, why people start nonprofits. The other thing I would say is when you have these gut wrenching, I want to help. And again, marketing and those storytelling can be great, but follow that money, all the way through on those organizations that are trusted. sometimes, I'm thinking we've been in COVID or we're getting out of COVID, food banks, and we've given out food. But if people are living in extended stays because of inflation and the number of evictions, what can they do with the full-size ham and canned goods if they don't have access to a stove, refrigerator? So again, the programs and the things that we're funding, because it's nice to say we put in $100,000 into the community and food services, but did you actually feed the community?
Great points. How can we sustain momentum for funding Black-led causes? And how can we support Black-led causes that benefit not only Black community, but society at large?
I mean, I would say that one of the ways to sustain momentum, I'm not sure if it's on us to sustain the momentum, if I'm following the question, as much as it is for us to continue to do what it is that we need to do to make change in our communities. But I think one of the things that we can do is, how do we support those that are within these seats in philanthropy as the program officers or program directors, or even sometimes in the C-suites and philanthropies, or even on the boards of trustees, is like, how do we support them in making sure that they can be covered and they can continue to make to move resources in the ways that's necessary. I think that's one thing that we sometimes we don't think about it as much. Oftentimes, Black folks or more progressive folks that are inside of these institutions are isolated in a lot of ways. They're isolated philosophically. They're isolated sometimes culturally, and they don't have the capacity, I'll say, but they don't have the backing sometimes from folks that are not inside of their institutions that are doing that need this type of work done. And so sometimes it is, how can we also figure out, how do we support those that are inside of these spaces to continue to move the resources in the space, to move resources to community that need to, while we're also continuing to do this work to try to shift the way that institutional philanthropy operates. I think, unfortunately, we do have to do both at the same time, but I feel like we gotta definitely give some love and some protection to those that are inside of these institutions that are working to move these resources in different ways.
Absolutely.
So I'm in the Bay Area, and it's been like overwhelming, like it's everything everywhere all at once, which is a great movie, by the way, of like, where can I tap in? So I'm interpreting your question like, as an individual, how can I sustain my own philanthropic giving, whatever, using my skills or finances, whatever. And my advice would be to, one, think locally, because you're going to be bombarded with issues nationwide and globally. So think locally, and then find a cause that's important to you, and find one grassroots organization, build relationships with the folks in that organization, and just keep using your skills and money to support that organization. I find that helps keep me from feeling overwhelmed and feeling like nothing can change and nothing will change. When you see folks on the ground doing the work, like in the Bay, there's an org called Moms for Housing, that helps reinforce or reinvigorate my commitment to sustaining giving. And I feel like it would do the same for others.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think you do get that feedback mechanism if it's a local community thing, and you see the impact it makes, and then that turns contagious and can scale. Erinn, your thoughts?
Also, I would say it's important to share what's important to you, what you want to give to. Sometimes, again, even people in my network group come to me because they, Melanated Pearl may not be their flavor, but they're like, who is doing this in your community? Because this I want to impact. Recently, someone came to me from Kentucky. We actually have a growing number of young ladies who are learning to ride horses. They're doing it for mental therapy. I posted something on social media, and someone reached out to say, again, not that my organization would benefit, but how do you link me to that? Because I want to support that. And so sharing, again, what other people are doing is that philanthropy. But if you are a person who wants to give, saying out loud what you want to give to, so that people can hear that, and that you might not be in the room, but they may then be in the room with someone can make that bridge, to connect that giving, because someone is waiting for your contribution.
Yeah, and socializing also makes people think about things. Like if I saw you post something like, oh, that's an interesting cause, let me help with that too, right? So it gives you ideas on how to get back. Sorry, Erinn?
Yes. So I'll kind of straddle the fence between individual philanthropy, which I think has been addressed really robustly, and then into some more institutional guidance. So in the individual sense, I think everyone's points make total and complete sense and really are the best path as an individual philanthropist to engage with a nonprofit organization. On the institutional side of things, I think it's the responsibility of grant-making organizations to invest in the operating capacity of the nonprofits that you funded when you had special diversity dollars. Quite frankly, some of the difference between the one-time gifts made from 2020 through 2022 and kind of what, the propensity for those organizations to fundraise beyond diversity funding moving forward comes down to having the infrastructure necessary to evaluate and run high quality programs. When you invest into the operating capacity of organizations, you increase their ability to track and communicate back to you what the return on investment, to use very marketized terms, are. And as a result, they are then able to leverage that data by getting dollars from other organizations. So oftentimes funders have conversations about sustainability, right? Well, what are you going to do in 2 to 3 years if our strategy changes? Or what's going to happen, to these positions that we're funding in the absence of being able to use this grant money from XYZ organization? If you're investing in their evaluation capacity, if you're investing in professional development, to get down to a more kind of grassroots level, since we're talking about kind of community-based grassroots organizations, if you're willing to make the equipment investments in some cases, be it software or hardware, you can make a catalytic change in the trajectory of an organization going forward. So I call on all of my funding partners who are present and watching this today, be it live or replay, to investigate the level of general operating support that we give to organizations overall, but most especially to Black-led, Black-serving, community-based institutions.
So Erinn, I'm going to add to that with another question to you. One is, so I'm an employee that works at a large Fortune 1000 company, right? And most Fortune 1000 companies have foundations. And so I find a cause that I think is actually really important. How do I get that on the radar of the organization?
So that process actually varies based on which organization you're at. So I will be very direct with you and say that my experience in a prior role working at a financial institution is vastly different than my experience working at Salesforce. In full transparency. Oftentimes, when you're at an organization, a large corporation, there is something known as an employee experience, employee engagement, corporate volunteerism. I'm thinking about all of the different words that we use to describe this one thing that comes down to, I have workers who have identified a community cause that may or may not be beneficial for my brand reputation within this particular community, and they would like to leverage our resources to support that cause. In doing so, that individual would likely engage with someone from that team who leads that body of work, and then inquire about the processes, the funding. At Salesforce, we have something known as citizen philanthropy, where colleagues at Salesforce are empowered to use their volunteer time off out in community, actually using their time, treasure, talent, and skills to positively impact the community around them. Other organizations in the past I've been at, it's meeting with your giving team to understand kind of what those giving priorities are and whether or not there's alignment. The one caveat that I'll issue that is the same across the board, especially when we're talking about corporate philanthropy, is that if the organization is not aligned to the pre-existing giving priorities that that institution has, you will need a significant level of influence and power to be able to facilitate that kind of relationship. So there is a bit of background research that goes into this in ensuring that there's actually a match. Just because you're passionate about it, to be transparent and kind of crass, doesn't mean that your company's going to care about it too.
So you have to connect the dots and say, I want to help this community, and this is how it helps our organization or builds some sort of bridge to them.
Yep.
Okay. And then can you share who Madam Walker is for those who don't know, and how she's embodiment of Black philanthropy?
Yes, you see the nice big smile I have on my face right now. That is because I love talking about the phenom that is Miss Sarah Walker. Madam C.J. Walker is probably most commonly known as the hair lady, right? Like, we wouldn't have perms if it wasn't for Madam C.J. Walker, hot combs, beauty schools that are at scale, salons that are at scale. And she is known as the first woman of any race, color, or creed to be identified as a millionaire. That would be, in today's time, billionaire in America. She is important because she is one of the most classic definitions of all that Black philanthropy can encompass. So it wasn't just her treasure, which she gave millions of over the course of her lifetime to support the NAACP, to start YMCAs in Indianapolis, to help Mary McLeod Bethune to start Bethune-Cookman University down in Florida, to help to preserve Frederick Douglass's home, to donate to legal defense funds and to aid in the fight of segregation, and to even raise awareness about the necessity of including Black women in conversations around business and industry. She was just all-encompassing when it came down to her treasure. In terms of her talent and time, her product line was bred from the hair issues that she had herself. She went bald at one point in time, and using her home remedies, she was able to devise a formula that helped to grow her hair, and she extended that to help uplift and to have empathy with the Black women who surrounded her in Indianapolis, which is where she's from. The other bit that I will share is that we talked about sponsorship. We talked about lending kind of what you're good at, right, to a nonprofit organization or to a cause. She did that. When she couldn't employ everyone at her hair care factories, she began to franchise her business so that women were able to license and have their own salons, much in the way that we have Avons and Mary Kay's today. She is the precursor to that business.
Wow.
When it comes down to, starting scholarship funds and helping to build out campuses, there is a school in the South, and I apologize so much because the name escapes me now, but she literally built a science lab on that campus so that folks are able to study chemistry. Yes, it was corporate philanthropy, right? Because she needs chemists to continue to manufacture her product, but it's also investing in Black people and opening up pathways to economic mobility. So we think about the Oprahs, right, where you have billions of dollars and you open a school and you lend your name. And we think about like Beyonce and Jay-Z because they do all of those same things contemporarily speaking. But the original quintessential philanthropist, in my opinion, is Madam C.J. Walker.
Love it. And if you listen to that carefully, you just threw out like 15 ideas that people can do.
Exactly.
Dr. Menzies, what are Maroon communities, and what can they teach us about the power of community and the collective?
So Maroon communities are free, rebel Black communities throughout the Americas. I use rebel intentionally. So they were founded by self-emancipated Africans who created hidden societies away from plantation society. So they're in mountains and jungles and swamps. This is not equivalent to running away to Canada to live free. They maintained a geographical location adjacent to plantation society, but were hidden away. And the reason I love studying Maroon communities and engaging with Maroons is learning different ways of being and operating, and specifically how community care is baked into their structures. So it's not based on individual goodwill.
Yeah.
People have specific roles and responsibilities to the community. So for example, there are some communities that still exist. Palenque is in Colombia. Jamaica has 4. Suriname has the largest maroon communities. I think there are about 75,000 people, called the Saramaka. But in Palenque, their society is structured in cuadros. They're called El Cuadro. They're age-based clans. So the people you grew up with, but you have duties and responsibilities in your cuadro. If there's a death in someone's family who's a part of your cuadro, your expectation is that you are there to support and plan funeral rites, feed the family, all of those things. And it's not based, again, on individual will. This is for having this community, here's your rights and responsibilities, kind of thing. And so I'm interested, as we know, as discussing what we discussed here, Black philanthropy is ancestral. Shout out to Erinn. And how do we systematize it and where it's not based on the individual, it's based on this is how our community structures itself, and these are our rights and duties as part of being a part of this community.
It's the ecosystem approach.
Exactly.
Yeah, love it. Bomani, how is the Nafasi Fund helping Black-led organizations use power for social change in their communities?
Sure. So Nafasi Fund, like I said, is a fiscal sponsor that supports Black-led organizations. And just thinking about some of the things that we've been talking about here, especially some of the things that Erinn and I have been talking about the challenges that Black organizations face when they are trying to actually secure funds or secure resources or investment from institutional philanthropy, is why we came to be. We're a fiscal sponsor, yes, but we think of what we call our approach is culturally restorative. And that approach means that it's 3 parts, right? We provide everything that any fiscal sponsor organization would provide for any group. So everything from the financial management to support with regranting when an organization may be receiving grants, to providing the infrastructure where we provide HR and our human resources and everything that's necessary for an organization to run. The second part of our approach is investing in organizations. And our investment comes in several ways. One is the way that our fees are structured is we cap our fees at 5%. So no organization that works with that partners with us will pay more than 5% of the contributions that they have coming in annually to their organization as their fee for being part of the Nafasi Fund. We found that, and having lived this work and also doing research as we started, their fees are sometimes as high as 15% from fiscal sponsors to support organizations. And for a small grassroots organization that has raised, if they've raised $50,000, giving up as high as 15% of it is just ridiculous, considering that the work is supposed to be supporting change in their communities, not supporting the existence of a fiscal sponsor. So we do that. The other ways that we invest in organizations is through our technical assistance and capacity building programs, so that we provide support to our partners to do what it is that they want to do. We're not one that says that you need to, we're not a fiscal sponsor that says that the highest ideal for what your work can be would be to become a C3. We will support you if that's your desire to do that. We will support you if you want to become an LLC or work in some other way with some other IRS tax designation. That's fine. But we want to make sure that what we're providing is working for you. So we also take the cues from our partners as to what the TA and capacity building resources look like. And the third part of our approach is investing in the people, right? We invest in the folks who do this work, because I know all of us unfortunately may actually know somebody who's literally died doing this work to change communities. And it's because there is no separation for Black folks. If you are working in something to change your society, to change the communities that you live in, while it may be your job and you may receive compensation for it, and you may have a 9 to 5, so to speak, there's no way to really detach from the issues that you're working on. So what we want to do is make sure that we provide health and wellness resources for our folks who are doing this work, not just so that we can be healthy and be hard workers, because that's some old slave mentality crap. But we want to make sure that folks are healthy and well so that they can be all that they want to be in the spaces they want to be, at work, in the community, at home, at the club, in the gym, wherever you are. We want you to be safe and be well and feel good. And so that's what we provide. And so those resources include a set of webinars on different healing and wellness modalities, an annual retreat that we provide. And we're also trying to figure out how can we provide some base level of healthcare for a number of our partners, because we find that most of them are not being compensated in any way, and having access to healthcare and trying to gain it through means that are, trying to go through the marketplace is a nightmare in most places. Trying to access healthcare in just about any place is a whole nother level of stress. And so we want to be able to try to mitigate some of that by providing a base level of healthcare for our partners as well.
Love it. Amazing. And then Crystal, what inspired you to start Melanated Pearl, and how is advancing change in the Black community?
So Melanated Pearl is actually born out of trauma. As people who know my story know, I started school in August, and then both of my brothers went to jail within a week of each other. And one of the things I say is bringing that black light to things that aren't quite right, because the thing that immediately hit me is that, of course, the storyline is Black male goes to jail, but something was happening to the Black women, me included, in my community, and nobody was having that conversation. And so Melanated Pearl, again, I've always been obsessed with pearls. Pearl stands for passionate, engaged, activist, resisting limits, because I think to be a Black female in America, every day that you get up and open your eyes, hit the floor, it is activism, because the systems and structures in place are not set up for you. And so I choose to shed a light on that, and also to serve the women who are in my community. I live in Clayton County, Georgia, which is 70% African American, and 58+% of our homes are led by females. And so that is my target population. COVID hit, and I saw Black mothers being put out. And so one of the things, we started programs, and I think somebody talked about this earlier. We are young, we're right now in the 4th year of Q4. But our programs actually move based on the needs of our community. So in year 4, I can speak to what we've been able to do. 1, we've been able to help 25 teachers to get funding for their classrooms, because in Georgia, you do not get reimbursed for money spent on your classroom. And again, most of our educators are females. And so we are seeing upward of $3,000 per year being spent out of pocket to educate children. And of course, in the vulnerable communities, that number goes up, and those teachers are spending more. We have continued our Mother of Pearl eviction prevention program. And so this year we were able to help 47 women and families by putting $68,000 in the community to prevent them from living in the street. And that does include those living in extended stays. We started and launched a collective collaborative called the Oyster Shell, where we were providing kind of a protective coating over the nonprofit small businesses that are actively in that grassroots phase, are new in our community, so that we could have those iron sharpen iron moments and elevate other people's craft. But also, as I said, I don't know how to do it, but I know somebody who knows how to do it. And when you ask, like, why did I start this? Because the Black women in my community were working, and I think Bomani talked about this, 9 to 5 and making cookies on the side. Just wait, baby, I'm gonna do your hair, right, Erinn? Because we are all talking about that philanthropy. Oh, she got a recital. Bring that baby over here so I can do her hair. And that was happening every day, in every moment. Nobody was talking about it. And I do call it compensation, but nobody was calling it compensation. And then I was blessed to go to Ghana in 2019. And I noticed in my week there that the only time there was a transfer of dollars was when I was engaging as a tourist. I saw mothers giving fish for clothing. Because again, if I'm hungry, I don't need dollars. I need food. I need the fish. If my children need the clothing, I'm using that money to buy the clothing. And so I brought that concept back. And that's what melanatedpearl.org does. Again, anything that I'm seeing, as I tell children, because I'm a former educator, when you see something that's not right in your community, not only can you get mad about it, get upset, but you can do something about it. You can create that change. And just because we're talking about philanthropy, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Because if you hear Melanated Pearl speak, you're going to hear me talk about this idea that Black people don't have money. Bothers me because we have money to put on our books, right? And when I say that, educated people might go, some people who survive poverty, their mind went to a specific place. Because let someone go to jail, let someone be incarcerated, and you'll get a phone call, baby, such and such, we need some money to put on their books. Let someone get out of jail. And I think we talked about the fish fry because we got to set them up because they got to go back into the community. And those things, again, are happening and happening more often in the communities where the people look like me. And what I've decided is that we do have funding. We don't have structures for our funding. And so now let's have conversations about getting the books for those going to college and trade school. Let's put the money on those books. And actually having purposeful conversations about coming together collectively to be that change. And so that is why Melanated Pearl was started. That's what we're currently doing, and that's what we thrive to do. And I will just give one more shameless plug. You see me talk about hard work because that's our newest initiative. Because as we talk about this, it requires your whole heart. We have to care when people don't care about themselves. And as a former teacher, people like, it's hard. No, I'm like, it's heart. It's your heart. It requires all the love that you can muster to actually wrap yourself around the community. And that's what we do. That is Black philanthropy. And that is ultimately why we educate, uplift, and empower at Melanated Pearl.
Amazing. Well, thank you all. I was going to end it a different way, but you just dropped the mic. So I think that's the best way to end it. Thank you all. This is an amazing conversation. I hope everyone found this educational, and we'll actively reach out to each one of you to sort of help the communities. It's an honor, and hopefully we do this again. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.